Hello, everybody. I am Zarina Harris. I'm the schmuck who they got to host this LOI meeting. LOI stands for Leaders of Integrity. And with me, I have the Revival brothers, Joe and Sean. Say hello.
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 And we have Sabrina Allen on the line as well.
Hello, guys. How are you guys doing?
She's not tech savvy, so please forgive her. All right. So we decided.
That was not nice. We starting already?
So the punchline or the tagline of LOI events is the unspoken truth. So this is a webinar where we don't pull any punches. We say what we need to say because there's a lot of foolery going on in the note industry right now. And I feel that we're on sort of a cusp of change within the note industry. And a lot of people are coming in when the note industry is kind of at its peak of a lot of different things. Like, you know, NPLs are at an all-time high as far as pricing. There's a lot of people coming in and wanting to do different things in the industry and don't necessarily have the education or the know-how how to do them. And then also, you got, some scam artists and stuff like that. So we're here to talk about that and really kind of establish LOI as a place where you can just come and get the unspoken truth. Anything you guys want to add to that premise?
I'm just honored that I was asked to be here by LOI and to be a part of the group. I think you hit it right on. The industry definitely needs this. We've heard many stories out there, nightmare stories from a lot of people that the industry just lacks integrity. And I think that this group is fantastic for bringing that back.
Yeah,
Cool.
and there was for us, when we first got into notes, there was a struggle to identify the right resources and trust with people. And so having this and being part of it, I think it's going to be the best thing for the note industry. I think there's a paradigm shift that's going to come, and I'm looking forward to being part of it.
And I think that paradigm shift, because most people don't really understand, especially the newbies, is the fact that you need a trusted source of information, whether that's whether that's sharing resources, whether that's education, whether that's purchasing assets, whatever it is. All of these items are important. And when we first started, they didn't exist. We just had to kind of put this big puzzle together. And I think that the more that we move forward in the industry, the more that that puzzle can be put together for you, and where everybody benefits. The people that organize it benefit, the speakers benefit, the audience benefits, especially the audience, because now they can go to one source for everything. So,
right.
Yeah.
Anything you wanted to add to that, Sabrina?
Well, the other thing is I think that vendor protection is also needed in our space. People, we have fly-by-night attorneys. I won't name anybody because you might bleep me out.
You can name them. I'll just bleep you. People love to bleep.
And sometimes somebody has spent thousands of dollars with an attorney and they've gotten no service. They've gotten nowhere through their foreclosure process, and they've been taken advantage of. And because they've been taken advantage of, they don't really have a safe place to come to talk about the money that they've deployed to the attorney. What are the next steps to do? And they basically bury their head in the sand. And when they do that, the homeowner is stuck, the asset is stuck, and the investor is stuck as well. And I want to be a part of moving these investors forward, or actually having a platform where they feel safe, where they can be vulnerable, and they're not judged, and they actually are able to find resolution and find help. I don't want to throw Joe and Sean under the bus about anything, but every day is a learning process for all of us. And I know they were thinking about how they were going to set up their business and how they were going to set up their series LLCs, and they had actually hired some attorneys, and they were just spinning their wheels with these attorneys. They had to pay a retainer, really wasn't getting any information, only expert after expert who actually didn't really end up being experts. And luckily I knew somebody by the name of Sherry Hill. She's right here local in Reno. I connected them together via phone. Sherry was able to answer their questions for them before they even had to deploy a deposit for what they had to do to set up their entities, their series LLCs. And I think as of just maybe a couple days ago, they were fully set up with Sherry and everything that they needed. And I think that she's actually going to be coming to speak at our event in July to give some more information on asset protection, setting up entities. She's also a registered agent here in Reno, Nevada, and very, very ethical when it comes to business practices.
And that's what we need in the industry. And she hit it right on, because I have to tell you, Sean did research for probably two to 3 weeks trying to find the best attorney, you know, looking at their experiences and everything. And it doesn't matter what they say as far as what kind of experience they have. It's how they communicate with you.
Mm.
We literally had our first meeting with them. These guys are $350 an hour. We had our first meeting with them, and we're asking them questions about how to set up our LLC, because we were looking to set up a series LLC. What some of the pitfalls were, how SEC regulation weaves into everything. We had some knowledge of what we were doing and what we were looking for, and we were asking some surface level questions, which we expected some answers on, you know, quick answers. And so we kind of got the runaround on the first call. This is $350 an hour. And then they basically told us, hey, you know, let's wait, let me talk to my colleagues and we'll get back to you, because we don't want to give you the wrong information. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
sure. You know, fast forward 2 to 3 more days, get on the phone again, still couldn't answer our questions. And, you know, all we really, you know, one of our major questions is, you know, how many non-accredited or sophisticated investors can you have within your company? And so I've always heard this number 35 out there, and so I was just waiting for them to, you know, give me some kind of idea. It took 3 weeks, and I still didn't get an answer, and I still kept getting the runaround. So after the fourth call and 3 weeks later, with nothing completed whatsoever, that's when we got on the phone with Sherry, and in 2 weeks we had everything completed and set up. So that just goes to show you.
Yeah, Cher is a breath of fresh air. She definitely helped us. I mean, it was frustrating trying to find or identify the right attorney, and the fact that when we thought we identified the right attorney, the attorney passes along to other people within the firm, and so by doing that, basically they lost the scope of what we were trying to accomplish,
Mm-hmm.
and it was just a waste of our time. So when it comes to attorneys, you really have to take control of what you want. And again, you know, networking and talking to people and being part of LOI is definitely going to
and
speak volumes.
Sometimes you don't even really know what you want. You need
Correct.
something, but you don't know exactly what you want.
Yeah.
And that's where collaborating with a group like LOI, and going to the events or meetups or webinars really comes in handy, because you can ask those questions and you can get that kind of deep feedback, and it's invaluable. You know,
So-
it's the
so
kind of
one-
stuff that the gurus out there try to promote and charge, you know, tens of thousands of dollars.
We can't come out the gate naming names, y'all. We're gonna get slapped. But no, but you guys touched on the topic, and we actually have a topic, y'all. But they touched on something very important, and that is, I think when a lot of investors come from, you know, the real estate world or you know, whatever investment kind of thing that they're in, and they come into notes, they tend to rely on vendors, which is not necessarily a bad thing, because no one person knows everything. And if a vendor has a specialized knowledge, then you go to that person. But the trouble is that the note industry is so niche and it's so, you know, specialized that you end up paying for your attorney or your vendor's education to learn what to do to help you, instead of getting somebody who actually knows how to help you. And that's wasting time, that's wasting money, and most importantly, that's wasting momentum, because when you get into the note industry, you just want to get started and going to invest, whereas, you know, you guys were just trying to set up an LLC. I mean, it took weeks on weeks just to do a very minor thing in the scope of, you know, your whole investment strategy. So.
Well, the thing is, we actually started looking into this over a year ago, and we'd have conversations with a few people and with our CPA, and, you know, it's trying to feel comfortable with what direction you're going, but when you don't get the answers you're seeking, it gets frustrating.
Or when
And
the answers vary so drastically, because you can talk to a lawyer that doesn't have any experience as a CPA or tax law, and what we're really talking about is the integration of tax shelters as well as setting up the company. And so what we were trying to do was we were trying to make the best experience for the investor as possible. We didn't want to send out multiple K1s. We wanted to send out one 1099, even if they had multiple investments. And these were our criteria going into it. And so it took quite a while for us to actually get to the point that we're at, even though it seems very trivial and something that could have happened in 2 weeks,
Right.
had we had the correct information.
So, so moving on to kind of our topic, Sabrina, you really picked this topic because you work with a lot of investors every day, more than probably any of us combined. And there are certain things that will come up that either you're surprised that they don't know, or you're surprised they don't have the knowledge on how to execute. And one of those things was, what do you do first in converting an REO, or to get NPL into an REO property? And then once it's an REO, what kind of exit strategy, specifically seller financing, could someone do in order to get themselves out of a deal? And so that seems to be a sticking point that you're finding with a lot of the investors that you're working with. And you decided, hey, let's talk about it. Can you kind of elaborate on that?
So one thing is that once the investor see like they have the asset that's in their name, they seem to be like they want to do a 100-yard dash and they don't even know how to jog, let alone sprint. And it gets really, really frustrating sometimes, is because there are certain steps that you should go through to protect yourself. And just because it's an REO doesn't mean that you have to have resolution in 20 days. There are certain steps that you need to take in order to do that. And, the two ways that you can actually have a property become an REO is, one is actually foreclosure completion, and you are the successful bidder at the foreclosure sale or the trustee sale. The other one is doing the deed in lieu of foreclosure and taking the property back that way. Two
Okay.
totally different things.
Right. So can we slow down a little bit with that? So basically, pretend I'm an investor. I just got my first NPL, and I want my knowledge base is in real estate. I don't know much about notes, but once I get into the real estate, I know what I'm doing. I'm very familiar with that.
Mm-hmm.
How do you're saying there's two ways for me to get from the NPL, the non-performing asset, to REO, and those two ways is foreclosure or getting the deed, and they're very two different strategies. So can we dive a little bit into foreclosure and what I should expect when I take an NPL and start to foreclose on it?
So there are processes, and depending on the state, depending on if it's a judicial or non-judicial state, it's a time factor. Judicial is much longer. It could be 6 months to 3 years. Non-judicial could be 21 days to maybe 90 days. So right there, that's a huge gap. A huge range. That's a huge gap. But nevertheless, there's a demand that needs to go out. The property, or not the property, but the loan has to be at least 90 days delinquent before you can start foreclosure, whether it's judicial or non-judicial, before you can send that demand. Some investors, the real estate person, or the landlord, when the loan becomes 60 days in default, let's get that foreclosure started. Let's get started right away.
Doesn't work like
no,
that.
It doesn't work like that. This is not a rental. It's not. Chill out, And sometimes I take for granted that I've been in this space for quite a long time, and I expect people to just know that. I'm guilty of that. So I have to sometimes take a step back and say, okay, let me explain the process. Let me make the investor understand that even though I understand that they've deployed their capital and they want to see results, there are things that we still need to do before we can start that foreclosure action.
Mm-hmm.
And that's important. Have you guys run into timeline issues in your investments, Joe or Sean? Like you expected something to happen in a certain amount of time and it took
Yeah,
long?
I mean, it was our first note. I expected it. It's just like Sabrina was saying, the 100-yard dash. I mean, we're just like, okay, let's go. And, that was an opportunity for us to understand that, you got to be patient with note investing. And so it was a learning curve for us. So we really, when it came to the paperwork and came to the collateral file and going through the process, it's it does not happen as quickly as you think it's going to happen. You just have to be patient with it.
And these are actually good lessons to learn, because when we were starting out in notes, we were trying to wrap a business plan around it, and our business plan was met with we had some expectations that I don't want to say were false, but we were told in the industry that a non-performing note from start to finish typically on average takes about 8 months. So we built that into our business plan. So we had to
I'm not going to ask who taught y'all that, but go ahead.
As we move forward and got more and more notes under our belt, we realized how to actually wrap the business plan around what is true in what we were doing on the non-performing side. And then at the same time, as you move through your note business, you're going to expand it. You're going to get into different types of notes, whether that's seller financing, performing notes, partials, whatever it is. Those will also naturally come about and become part of your business. And I think again, the value of what we have here is to be able to share those experiences with you, so you have these shortcuts at your fingertips.
So I'm just going to interject here, because a lot of you guys know, what industry I specifically was in. And when you're trying to get people motivated and excited about the note industry, there's certain things that aren't really sexy. They're not things that you say because they'll kind of kill the sale. And foreclosure was actually one of those topics, because nobody likes talking about the fact that you have to foreclose and you have to sit there and wait. And so they would try to make it, they would try to sugarcoat it and stuff. And they would say, 40% of the time you're going to get the deed from the person. 40% of the time you're going to get a modification, and only 20% of the time you're going to have to do a foreclosure. I mean, it's like 20% of the time. And it was funny because I think it was HUD or Fannie Mae. I'll have to get the graphic and put it up. But basically, they broke down like 50-some thousand loans that they had sold, and did a percentage of how much of that was foreclosures, and it was over 49% of the time. So it's one of these things where what you're sold on the note industry for, what kind of gets you excited and gets you in there and motivated and wanting to buy notes, is not necessarily lined up with reality of what you really have to do and what it really takes to actually work out a loan.
And I think you hit it right on the spot too, because you ask where we got that information, and I have to tell you, we got that information from trade shows, from all kinds of all different aspects of the industry. It wasn't just coming from one source, right? So it was almost like fake news.
It wasn't fake news. You were at the dog and pony shows.
Yeah.
Oh, did I say that? I'm sorry. I'm gonna be quiet. I'm gonna stop. I promise.
It's true though. It's true. And they're just, a lot of the times when I see someone, really excited about the note industry, overly excited, it's because they've been sort of sold on an idea that's not realistic. And then they get in the industry and they get very discouraged because, oh my God, I thought I was going to be able to buy this note in January and take it back by the summer, fix it up and sell it by September. And that's not the case.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, that was our business model was built around, for us, we would get the non-performing note and basically get possession of it. But we were targeting vacant assets, vacant properties. So, long story short, it turns out that that's not even a sustainable business model. So, you may go into note investing thinking one thing, and the reality is going to be completely different.
Yep.
So,
well, what's a business model for one might not be a business model for another, because there could be people using their retirement funds to invest, which, you know, that could be a viable way to do it. It just depends on everybody's flavor and what they're trying to do, I think.
And that's another thing too. A lot of people don't know the wide scope of what can be done in the note industry, and they just think, oh, you know, I'm going to do this one thing, because there is a lot that you can do in this industry, just from performing and non-performing, you know, sides of the spectrum. Anything else about I mean, we can go forever on foreclosure, but I wanted to get to the second topic, which is deed in lieu, on how you can get your NPL to an REO. So is there anything else you want to add about foreclosure? If not, then can you tell us a little bit about deed in lieu?
Well, but before we get too far into that, and I'm just going to talk for the people that are on our webinar that are asking questions, because I see some questions here, and they're probably the newbies that are coming in. They don't know some of these terms, so we should probably explain some of the terms before we get too far into it. And then also, when we talk about foreclosure and seller financing, I think we should also talk a little bit about the sources. You know, how do you where do you go to start a seller financing process? You know, let's say you do go through an REO. I mean, what does that look like? How long does that take? Who are you talking to? Those are the basic questions, I think.
Okay.
We should focus on.
So I see my brother is actually jumping the gun, because those are kind of things that we're going to handle.
Well, no. I mean, you know, it's not jumping the gun. It's just you can answer those questions in about 2 sentences. You know,
Sure.
Just paraphrase it. I mean, you can literally talk for 2 hours on each of those.
NPL means non-performing loan. And that's just basically any kind of defaulted mortgage, deed of trust, contract for deed, anything that's gone into default. So that's what NPL, when we mention that. Foreclosure, you might see that abbreviated FC, and that's basically just when you're applying a process to get the rights to the property, the collateral. So you're basically performing a lawsuit, so to speak, in order to get the collateral that your note is written against, your security instrument. And then we said deed in lieu, which is basically short for deed in lieu of foreclosure, which is Sabrina could probably elaborate on this, but basically it's a contract that the borrower can sign, kind of signing over their rights to the property back to the lender without having to go through foreclosure. So it can be a quicker process and much cheaper than going with a full foreclosure, where you have to go through, if you're in judicial, you have to go through the court system, you have to hire an attorney and things like that. So it's definitely more ideal, but I think Sabrina is going to segue into, it's not always the best scenario, and there's a few things that you probably don't want to do a deed in lieu with.
So a couple of things in reference to a deed in lieu of foreclosure. You always should pull title to see what's out there. Meaning if there's any nuisances on the property, if the borrower has any judgments, if the property has changed names because the borrower actually did a quit claim deed to someone else, because now we have to pull in someone else in order to be able to do the deed in lieu of foreclosure. We have to pull someone else back in. So it's always good to have a picture of what you're dealing with. So the other thing that could also come up in reference to a deed in lieu of foreclosure, taxes, IRS tax liens, taxes have been sold. What does that look like? You can't get rid of, property taxes, but if there is an IRS federal tax lien, you may still have to complete the foreclosure. When you take a deed in lieu of foreclosure back, you should always communicate in writing, letting the borrower know that we still may have to complete the foreclosure process in order to get clear title if you can't clear up what you see on title. And sometimes investors really don't understand that. Well, I thought you got a deed in lieu of foreclosure. Well, you won't have a clear title, so you could never really sell this property and offer a warranty deed on this property. So again, making sure that the investor also understands if they don't have a strong background in real estate. The other thing in reference to a deed in lieu, you can't really do a deed in lieu if the borrower is in an active Chapter 13 or a Chapter 7.
Why?
And unless you get permission from the trustee and from the bankruptcy court. Because when the borrower is in an active 13 or an active 7, they're protected under the bankruptcy court. So that means that you can't pursue or enforce any debt that they owe at that time. But if the borrower is surrendering the property, or you've gotten a motion of relief to be able to move forward to sell the property through foreclosure, then you can maybe go into negotiations and in conversation with the borrower and the borrower's attorney. If the borrower is in a Chapter 13 or a 7, you cannot legally reach out to the borrower directly without having permission from the bankruptcy attorney. Make a note of that, because you actually are now violating FDCPA. You're violating Fair Debt Collection Practices that protects the consumer. Doesn't protect you as the lender, it protects the consumer. So that is some of the strong points and high points that you have to, you look at when you're doing a deed in lieu of foreclosure. But there's also some documents that you actually should get the borrower to execute when doing a deed in lieu of foreclosure. One of those is the limited power of attorney for a real estate transaction. That's one. And then the other thing I would do is I would get a borrower's authorization from them as well. Because if there's things that have come up on the title and you want to be able to solve them, either the limited power of attorney for a real estate transaction, appointing someone that can take care of that on behalf of the borrower, or the borrower's authorization gives your entity the permission and the ability to be able to work through all of those things that may show up on title.
Okay, so I'm gonna slow it down a little bit for all my slow people with me.
And I have a question for Sabrina too. So
hey, she'll just go off, and you're just nod your head because you don't understand what the heck she's saying. So I'm an investor. I decide, hey, I want to go get the deed in lieu. I can contact the borrower. They seem ready and able. They're sick of this. I don't want to have to go through foreclosure. I want to save a little bit of money. So I start to talk to the borrower. They're not in BK 13 or 7. So I'm contacting them directly, or am I doing that through my servicer?
Well, it depends on who you're dealing with. If you're dealing with Main Street, Main Street's going to be doing all this for you. And if you do it yourself, I'm going to fire you as a client. Do you understand?
Hey, I just want to make it perfectly clear. I just want to make it perfectly clear.
If you're using someone like I won't say, or I won't say, or I won't say,
you can say, and then I'll bleep you out.
No, but if you're using, a few services will permit you to do your own workouts, and you actually just basically have your loan parked there for monthly statements, for accounting purposes. And then if that's the case, they may allow you to do your own borrower outreach or your own borrower interaction.
So but I think it's important for everybody to understand that everything that you're saying is super, super important. It's important to understand on the surface level, but it's not necessarily something that they have to become experts in, because there are services out there available and resources out there that they can tap into.
Absolutely.
So I'm using my servicing company. They're contacting the borrower to get the deed in lieu. And am I incentivizing this borrower? Am I paying them money, sort of like a cash for keys type thing? What am I doing to incentivize them not only to sign the deed over to me, but also to sign power of attorney? Because that might be a little bit of a hump to get them to understand.
So the first motivation is that they no longer have this cloud hanging over their head, whether it's a $20,000 balance or it's a $350,000 balance, that is kind of like this dark cloud that the consumer, the borrower, has hanging over them. Sometimes it's just as simple as offering that without giving an incentive other than you get to walk away and we will no longer bother you, and you won't have a deficiency balance after we complete the foreclosure if a deficiency balance is enforceable. That's the first incentive. Now, because, people have talked and the industry has all this hoopla about, cash for keys and, my neighbor got offered $20,000 to deed the property back to the bank, or my neighbor got $3,000 or $4,000 to deed the property back to the bank, or even the previous lender before you bought the loan offered me X amount of money to deed the property back. And my response to them, I tell my asset managers, well, you should have took it when it was offered with the other lender, because it's now not on the table. But I mean, sometimes the other thing is if we actually do offer money, we actually offer it in increments. So if the property is occupied, so let's just say that we're going to give them, you know, $1,500. At the time of execution, we actually give them $500.
And by execution, you mean them signing the documents?
Yes.
And
So
how do you get those documents over to them? Is that a mobile notary?
We would use a mobile notary to go out to meet with them. And when they execute the documents, we would actually send a check to the mobile notary and they would deliver it and it would be an even exchange. If the property is occupied, we may offer the next $500 at the time that the property is actually vacated, broom swept condition. And once we actually are able to get the property on the market for sale, we would maybe give them the remaining $500. It just depends on however you want to structure it, but that's just one example on how we would do that. Or we could split it in half and just do it in 2 parts versus 3.
Got it. I've heard of some investors, they will do, they'll offer, you know, like $1,000 or $500 or whatever the case might be, if the house is left in broom swept condition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because a lot of times they'll move out and they'll leave all their stuff there. So there's always some sort of contingency. I also had an investor give them the money to move for moving money, and they didn't move out for months. So, you know, you just kind of have to understand what you're dealing with, whether you're going to split that up and kind of incentivize them, or if you're going to say, no, we want you to be completely out and we'll give you the money after you're gone and you've, you know, kind of cleared out the house.
So, you know, you got some people, they just dumber and stupid, right? You know, it just, it is what it is. Where you haven't made your mortgage payment in 3 years and you're going to say to me, how can I trust you? Well, how can I trust you? And you haven't made your mortgage payment in 36 months. So here we are. Are we going to just stand here? Are we going to do the luck of the draw, or are we going to compromise here? You know, so really, borrowers are crazy.
Yes.
They have the audacity for sometimes this morning I was on the phone. I said, am I being punked today? I just put my phone on mute.
We all got them punk stories.
Oh, yeah. I have a quick question, though, for Sabrina in relation to the title. So you mentioned that you're pulling title for a deed in lieu, just to make sure that everything's clear. Now, are you actually going to get title insurance to close the transaction to do the deed in lieu? You don't?
No.
Okay.
No,
so,
we just want to know what we're dealing with. And so here's something else that investors do. Dumber and stupid. I shouldn't say that because that's really insulting people. And somebody might not want to be part of us because I'm saying dumber and stupid. So, okay, I'll take that back. I'll rename it. But sometimes an investor will take a deed back. They'll pull title and they don't record the deed right away into their name. They hold on to it because they don't want, so like Cuyahoga County, as soon as you're the owner of that property, you know, if you don't cut the grass, if you have things not going right with your property, now the city is after you or your organization. So sometimes the investor they make the choice not to record their deed, but when they do that, they leave a gap open and you don't know what the borrower is going to do from the time they executed the documents until the time you record the deed. So now something may come up, they may get a judgment against them after you pull title, and now you have a or a surprise. So I don't recommend investors holding on to deeds and not recording them because they want to avoid the city for nuisances on the property. So you have to also factor that in when you're doing this.
So now we're up to the point, I've got my MPL, I've either foreclosed or I've gotten the deed. Now I have to do some sort of recording because now the property is mine. Can we talk about recording? Because I think people think it's as simple as just walking down to the courthouse and in a matter of like 2 hours, you're done.
So you can record a couple of ways. You can e-record. Because it's just basically, it's a quick claim deed. It's not a warranty deed. You can send it to the county to record, but a lot of times I'll actually hire a local title company to actually record that document for me. And because sometimes the margins, a lot of things are different in every single county. And sometimes the county will actually reject your deed.
Because of the
it's
formatting.
because of the formatting, or there's something that's not compliant with that county. But now think about this. Now your borrower is gone. They're gone, and you have something that's not compliant. So I even recommend that you use a local attorney or a title company to draft your documents if you don't have someone internally that knows all the rules and regulations for every county and every state for your deeds.
So if we're just paying attention here, you've gone from obviously whatever source you had to get the note in the first place. Then you're pulling title, which means you need a title company. Mm-hmm. Then you need, some sort of servicer, hopefully, to contact your borrower and get a hold of them to see if you can get a deed in lieu. If you can't, then you're starting with foreclosure. So that either means a servicer and an attorney or just your servicer. Then you need, if you're going for deed in lieu, you need someone to help get the documents there, which is like a mobile notary. And then you need someone to kind of oversee the process of the people moving out. That could be like, some people use a realtor to kind of make sure it's in broom swept condition, some sort of boots on the ground there. And then you're using a local title company or a local attorney to record it. So that's 6 different vendors or outside sources that you're using to get this process done, just to take it from MPL to REO.
Yes.
All right. So now we're at the point where we've got the property. Let's say it's not in the best condition. Yeah, they left it in broom swept. It's not prestigious, but it needs some repairs, or it needs, it's got a roof that's leaking, or the furnace is really old or something like that. It's just not in the best condition. What is your advice there? Because I have my opinions, because I've seen a lot of people doing things at that point with properties like that.
So I actually would use a property preservation company. And the reason I would use a property preservation company is generally they're going to give me photos. They're going to give me estimated damages. And some of the property preservation companies have to go by Freddie and Fannie guidelines. Not always the cheapest, but at least they're going by some guidelines that are standard guidelines. Going out to Craigslist, trying to find a contractor, don't do that. I won't call no names, but just don't do that. Or if you're going to use contractors, get 3 contractors to give you the bid on the same type of work. Don't look at 3 different bids with 3 different types of services and think that one's cheaper than the other. So that's why I always go to the property preservation companies first. So there's one in Ohio, A to Z. And then there's another one in Ohio. I can't think of the name, the owner. No offense to anybody, but you can bleep that out.
Well, we use a company called Sandcastle, the property preservation.
Out of Wisconsin.
Okay.
And we might just have all these resources for everybody that shows up to the LOI event coming up in July. So we'll why don't we say this now, that if you come to that event, we will put together a list for you of resources that actually are trusted and have been used many times over in the industry by a lot of the professionals in the industry that are actually making money and quite successful. So
yeah,
why don't we do that?
Okay, that's fair. And then sometimes, a local agent may also be someone that can actually facilitate if you're going to do any repairs, or you can just choose to sell it as is. That's one of the other options, or sell it as is with seller financing in place.
So let's say I've got my property, it's not moving on the market because it needs too many repairs. Realtors don't really know how to market it because whatever. And I decide, hey, I want to do some seller financing. This is, and I'm speaking here. So this is where I have a rub. And that is because, first of all, how the people are marketing the property. A lot of people use Craigslist to market seller finance properties, which I do not necessarily agree with. There's better resources that you can put to get a better pool of buyers in. So that's first. Second, they're typically selling to an owner occupant, and there's major repairs to be done on the property. And they don't have necessarily the money to fix those things, but you're kind of hooking them by saying, oh, well, you're going to get this at a discount. So that's why, we're going to sell you this house that's falling down and decrepit. So that was done enough by major hedge funds to where they created so much of that kind of paper. And then they did it not even on a mortgage or a deed of trust. They did it on a contract for deed, that they were selling all of these properties to these mom and pop, just everyday owner occupants who don't have the money if the furnace goes out. And then they were dumping and selling those loans into the secondary market for retail buyers, like where we kind of sit. And now we're stuck with the hot potato and all the problems because now we have a non-performing loan or whatever the case might be. So to go through that process of buying an NPL and then you repeat the same pattern is a problem with me, because you're not fixing it and you're sort of perpetuating one of the issues that we have in our industry. Anybody have comments on that?
You're putting a Band-Aid over a problem. And then so the other thing is that we want to change how the industry is operating. And the way we change that is that if you really want to do seller financing and you want a bang for your buck, one of the things that you can do is actually do some of those major repairs, not just lipstick and rouge. Make sure that there's a new roof on there, or the roof is in decent shape. Make sure that there's an operating furnace. Air conditioning is not a necessity, but make sure that the electrical's up to code. And then when you do that seller financing, factor that into your cost and season that note. Don't put it so far up above market value, but you can actually increase the value of that loan. Put that borrower in a 7.5% to 8% interest rate, and then sell your loan at par once you have it seasoned. And now you've gotten your investment back, you've made a profit, and now you are putting America back on its feet, one mortgage at a time. And it actually creates a better environment for us all to operate in.
Right.
So I think a big question for a lot of people out there, especially the people that are buying performing notes, is how do you tell whether one of those performing notes has been, gone through the ringer, as you suggested, Zarina?
So how do I know if a performing loan that I've purchased is one of sort of these predatory loans?
Right. Well, something that they've gone through foreclosure and they've basically hidden the fact that this was a non-performing loan, and all of a sudden it looks like it's a performing loan because the history has been fixed, and some of the debt has been put to the back end of the loan, and there's all kinds of different ways to do it. But
okay, so the gloves are off now.
So one of the things you
this
can
is the
this is the unspoken truth.
This is the unspoken truth. So
this is really happening.
It is what it is.
All right, so you're putting me on the spot. So I would say that and I'm being extremely conservative here, but 30% of the loans that are being sold as performing today aren't really performing. And it's playing on somebody's ignorance. So when you're coming into the space and you don't know any better, you don't know how to do certain things. One of those things is you don't know how to look up performance record or like a pay history. You don't understand forbearances. You don't understand, how to evaluate whether something is subperforming based on the payment history and things like that. So what happens is one of these loans that was originated by one of these funds goes through the ringer, it's non-performing. A company will actually purchase it, put it into forbearance, and basically reset the loan. So this person may not have paid for 2 or 3 years, okay? But they reset the loan by doing a forbearance agreement. And because according to the forbearance agreement, next payment due is July 2019, me being unsuspecting, and then you label it as performing, me being unsuspecting, I'm going in, I want to buy a performing loan. I'm going to go to the performing loan basket and I'm going to look through there and, oh, you know what? This person's on time. Their next payment is next month. That gives me a really good thing. I'm not going to know, you know what? You should look at the pay history and really figure out if this is performing or not. I'm trusting the source. The source says it's performing. It's got to be performing, right? So I buy the loan, and then come July, I don't see a payment. And, you know, I say, oh, maybe that's because, so I ask somebody and they say, oh, no, it's because, you know, service transfer. Okay, cool. But then August comes and I don't see a payment. And then September comes and I don't see a payment. So for me, I'm pissed at my servicer because they're not collecting my payments. When in reality, I bought a non-performing loan for a performing loan price.
And you
that's
should
the
be
truth.
pissed at the seller and not at your
You should be pissed
your
at the seller.
servicer.
Yeah.
Don't
Absolutely.
call me
Right.
asking me why the borrower's not paying because they wasn't paying before you transferred the loan over here to Main Street.
Correct.
But what you should have done was your due diligence, and you should have asked for a payment history and asked for some canceled checks before you actually decided to buy the loan. That's what you should do. But because people are all in their hype and they on that high that I'm getting ready to buy me a performing loan,
Correct.
and I'm take all my money out my retirement to buy it, they're not thinking about covering their behind before they actually hit the button to send when they're sending that wire.
And we're talking about a major difference in price. So a non-performing loan, unfortunately, now they're in the low 60s, high 50s. Performing 80s, 85 cents, stuff like that. So imagine buying a non-performing loan for 85 cents on the dollar. That's what you just did.
Yeah, and that's why I brought this up, because again, this is the unspoken truth, and I think that if our goal is to kind of change the industry and get it back on track and bring some integrity back, these are important aspects to understand and know what's really going on out there.
You know, the other thing is, you guys, is that people don't want to talk about these things, and
Right.
we are actually creating a conversation that most of the people who are in your face every single day, every single week, hyping notes up, are not talking about the things that we're talking about right now.
No.
They're not talking about the good, the bad, the ugly. And the note industry, you can be very, very successful. You can have longevity in the note industry, but you have to educate yourself, and you have to educate yourself with truth and not with a false promise.
Right.
Hype, bunch of hype.
And there's, again, not to name any names out there, but there are some people that call themselves gurus that teach only enough to get you to the point where you can purchase an asset, but not necessarily teach you in depth all of what you need to know to make a sound, safe choice. So I think that one of the things that this group is going to bring to the table is not just our directive, but also trusted professionals in the industry that can speak to these truths.
And another thing is, be careful of the exchanges when you're looking at. Do your due diligence. Look at that pay history. If something seems to be a little bit off, ask more questions. Because you only make money in this business at the purchase, and that's it.
Yeah, and that gets down to other discussions that we'll probably cover in other webinars related to analytics, understanding what your expenditures are. We talked a lot about some scary items today. You've got servicing fees, lawyer fees, property preservation fees. You got a list of all kinds of fees coming in, and so how do you consolidate all that and understand what your true costs are going to be? And those are some things that we can get into in additional webinars, and actually we will be getting into it at our event in July. So
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. So we pretty much took it to the process where now we're doing a little bit of seller financing. Sabrina, you had mentioned something that is a topic that I like to talk about too. You said, give them 7.5%, 8%. So I've been, and I regularly now go to Capitol Hill to talk and advocate, not just for seller financing, but just the note industry and lending, small lenders in general. And one of the things, no matter where I go, and the last meeting that I had was with a CDFI, a local, like the person who ran it. And the thing that she asked me when I mentioned to her seller financing, she said, well, what kind of interest rate are you giving them? And I'm kidding you not, that's the same exact question that I got in the, I forget what building it was, on Capitol Hill, Rayburn building. Okay. I'm sitting in front of, a congressional staffer, and he's like, well, what kind of interest rate are you giving them? That's all these people really care about. And so I had to figure out a way to give them what they want so that we can get leverage as far as the industry is concerned. Because one thing that we don't do is we don't talk about politics, but then we complain when they make laws and rules against note investors. And so if you're ever going to get their attention, you have to give them what they want. And one of the things is we just tend to pick numbers out of the sky when we're doing seller financing. We're like, yeah, we're going to give you 10%. Well, what predicates 10%? Well, everybody else does 10%, but why? And so seller financing is like in this copycat syndrome where, well, we always kind of gave 10%. So why not? But then the moment that you try to go to a local lawmaker and say, hey, can you make some rules that kind of help us? And they say, what kind of interest rate are you giving the person? And you say 10 when prime is 5.5, they're not going to understand that. And that automatically flips them over into, you're a predatory lender. I'm not doing anything for you.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So one of the things that I tell people is have a reason why you're giving the interest rate that you're giving. And one good sort of measurement that I've found, and this depends on your exit strategy too, is to just do 2 points above prime. So prime is 5.5. So we just do, you could say my company, we do 2 points above whatever the prime rate is, and that would be 7.5%. So now, yeah, it's still 7.5%, but now there's a reasoning behind it. And you can justify it to somebody who doesn't understand the industry. Any kind of input on that?
Yes. So I think that you make a very, very good point about investors. We are in a copycat business. But the other thing is that when you're looking at someone to do seller financing with, how are you coming up with that criteria to charge them 10%? Because they're a higher risk, they're a greater risk. And if you can explain that they're a greater risk, maybe it'll support you charging a higher interest rate. Coming from the origination world, CD lending, when borrowers were a riskier borrower, they had to buy their rate down. Sometimes they would start at 12 and they would have to buy their rate down by 4 points in order to get to where they wanted to be to make their payment affordable. And I know those things aren't really smiled upon these days, but if you have reason behind it to support that and documentation, and how do you get that documentation? If you're doing a seller finance deal, make your borrower complete a 1003, and that's a loan application. Collect documents to support they actually can afford that mortgage payment that you're getting ready to put them into. Collect bank statements, collect pay stubs, collect proof of Social Security, or whatever their disability payment may be. How many dependents do they have? Don't set somebody up for failure just because you want a success.
Right.
Exactly.
Look at it long term. And even if you're thinking, I'm going to sell this loan in 6 months to a year, is it fair to whoever you're buying it to know that this individual up front is actually going to fail in 6 months to a year? So I was actually looking at some contract for deeds that one of our clients recently purchased here at Main Street. And so in order to get rid of a land contract or to terminate a land contract, you have to have a termination agreement between you and the borrower in order to actually be able to move forward without any issues with terminating that agreement. So what I'm looking at in the file is like, these jokers actually got the borrower to sign the termination agreement at the time of origination. You crooks, it's insulting, so they're probably thinking, well, we're giving them a loan and they don't really qualify. Well, don't give them the loan.
Right.
If you have to feel the need to get a termination agreement up front and executed the same day you actually give them keys to a property you own, then that means that they're not worthy of the property. That's what that means to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, my staff was like, well, do we need to get a new termination agreement? Yes, you do. Yes. Don't ask me that again. But, some of this stuff is just like common sense to me. And I just don't believe in taking advantage of people just because they're poor, they're ignorant, or they're not educated the way we are.
Right.
That is why America is in the state that it's in, because we prey on the vulnerable. And even in the note industry, some of the gurus prey on the vulnerable, the people who want to fit in. I'm on a rampage, so I'm gonna be quiet. I'm gonna sound like
that's
I'm the granddaughter that I am.
I think that's a great place to kind of start to calm down a little here, because I noticed that we're running a little bit over time, and
Yep.
there's literally 1,000 different topics we can go off on, and we will cover many more in the future. But I'm going to let Zarina close it for us.
All right. So basically, we have 2 more webinars scheduled with different topics here at LOI. So, send in your questions. Was it info@loievents.com?
Yes.
They can send in questions.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to highlight, well, I don't know how deep you guys want to get into it. So LOI, we really kind of live by that unspoken truth thing. So we don't really pull punches too much. It just depends on what topic we get on. So today we were just kind of talking about, things that we're seeing in the industry as far as what people might be struggling with or what they don't really understand the full process of. So hopefully you got a few nuggets out of this. But basically, LOI is here to kind of set a precedence in the industry, not just with information and education, but just really how to execute your business and stuff like that. So we've got the Revival Brothers in LOI. You've got me in LOI. Sabrina's in LOI. And we have some featured guests and some affiliates of ours who are, just at the top of their game as far as how to execute things for note investors, how to structure things, but also doing it with a lot of integrity and just kind of straight shooters, just like we are. And that's what we're all sort of known for. So this is kind of our introduction from LOI, our little group here. We'll probably get into another webinar where we talk about why we decided to join LOI and everybody's kind of backstory. But for now, what do you say, Joe? We
I would just encourage everybody to go to our website and sign up for our newsletter, because that'll get you on into our database where we can let you know what's going on with the different events, webinars that are coming up. We have a lot of free free webinars similar to what we're doing now, and they're going to have some very good information in it, and you don't want to miss it.
Right.
The other thing that I want to point out is that in July 26th, we're going to put on an event in Reno. Yeah. And our speakers are very experienced. They deliver focused discussions on investment strategies, methodologies, due diligence, and they share a variety of insights and resources that you're just not going to get anywhere else. So I think that if you have time and you're serious about note investing, it's something to definitely consider.
So it's not only in Reno, but we're also offering that digitally. So for people who don't want to travel or can't travel.
That's a great point too. And I think that, there's a lot of people that put on events, but what we're trying to also do is create this environment where you can actually physically come, or you can do it virtually. And I think that allowing that and that choice is something that not a whole lot of other people are doing.
Absolutely. So that's it from me, Sabrina, Joe.
I have nothing else to say. It was great catching up with you guys.
Appreciate it.
Take care.
All right. Take care.
All right. We'll see you guys next time.
Happy investing.